Again, and we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Moving on to roll call.
Nelson.
Present.
Sean Sansel.
Present.
Kelly Lee. Charlie Robbins.
Here.
Tom Beresnick.
Present.
Frank Santa Cruz.
Here.
Ed Berber.
Present.
John Bernal. Frank Fry.
Here.
Bill Schlesinger.
Here.
If I just think of a reminder again with the sensitivity of the microphone, please try to refrain from any kind of side comment or discussion unless you want to put your hand over your mic or turn it off. But also make sure you speak clearly and loud enough in the microphone so that the recording device and those via WebEx can hear. Just a bit of
Thank you, Gilbert. Moving on to the approval of the meeting summary from April 23rd. Give you a few minutes to review them.
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes as drafted.
Is there a second?
I'll second with an amendment. Okay, so my changes are on page 4 in paragraph 7, the first sentence, where it says last week GVC. It was actually the Green Valley Sahuarita Chamber of Commerce that hosted that. And the gentleman's name was Huffman, Huffman. That's all, Chair.
Okay. So all in favor of approval as amended?
Aye.
Any objections? It's approved. Moving on to item number 4, the Arizona Department of Transportation Strategic Highway Safety Plan.
Online with us right now, we have Elaine Mario, and forgive me if I mispronounce your name, Elaine from ADOT. Can you hear us?
Yes, and that was correct, thank you.
Great. I do have your presentation on screen. I can try to see if I can have you share your desktop or not. If you just cue me when to change the slides, I can change them for you as we go along.
Okay. I was waiting, I think I'll just go ahead. We have another colleague who's not on here yet, but I'll just go ahead with speaking for him. Thank you for inviting Arizona Department of Transportation to present on the Strategic Highway Safety Plan and Active Transportation Safety Action Plan. We appreciate your interest in discussing how we can make Arizona's roads safer. The Strategic Highway Safety Plan, I'm going to be speaking for Daniel Oldham, who is with the Strategic Highway Safety Plan, and I'm Elaine Mariel, and I'm the Active Transportation Safety Action Plan Project Manager. And Michael Brandy, who's here with Kimley Horn, is a consultant assisting ADOT on both of those plans. Could you go ahead and advance the slide? Sorry about that. Yeah. Okay. Today we're discussing ADOT's plans to update the Arizona Strategic Highway Safety Plan, or the SHSP, and create the first of Arizona's Active Transportation Safety Action Plan, or the ATSAP or ATSAP. We'll also be We'll also be talking about the safe system approach. After the presentation, we'll be happy to take any questions that you may have. So, the next slide, please. So first, the Strategic Highway Safety Plan. And the Strategic Highway Safety Plan is a policy document that's updated every 5 years under federal guidelines. Our last SHSP was completed in 2019. The purpose of the SHSP is to establish a roadmap for how ADOT and its safety partners can help reduce fatalities and serious injuries on Arizona roadways through a series of strategies and actions. We plan to complete and find SHSP available to the work. The study team has prepared an initial analysis and identified key findings, which we will share in this presentation. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide, please. Sorry about that. In traffic, Arizona road. We're seeing a concerning rise in traffic fatalities on Arizona roadways in recent years. They are 70% higher now than in 2010. In 2022, more than 1,300 people died in crashes on Arizona roadways. While the 2023 numbers are still being finalized, it appears that numbers will be even higher for 2023. These are more than statistics. Each of these represents someone's loved one who's no longer alive and whose quality of life is forever changed by a crash. We need to work together to help turn this around and to save lives. Next slide, please. The draft SHSP vision and goal have been developed in coordination with the SHSP Executive Committee, which consists of representatives from federal, state, and tribal entities. The last paragraph. Okay, I'll just finish it. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Last paragraph. Do you want to read it, Daniel? This is the project manager for the Strategic Highway Safety Plan. Daniel, do you want to read the last paragraph?
Sure. Yeah.
The draft
Yeah.
SHSP vision, that's where we're at.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so the draft vision is just creating a shared responsibility so everyone arrives home safely. So we know that it's not just the goal of ADOT, that it's the responsibility of many stakeholders to work together in order to get those numbers down and to reduce serious injuries and fatalities. And of course, that's the vision, but we want specific goals. And that specific goal is to reduce life-altering traffic crashes by 20% by 2030. And again, based on our trends, it's a lofty goal, but we know together we can reach it if we're working together and collectively have that same goal in mind.
Okay, next slide, please. Okay, the active so I'm going to do, next slide, please. Plan or the ADSAP is to develop specific improvement strategies and projects where pedestrians and bicyclists interact with the state highway system. The ADSAP builds on the pedestrian and bicyclist safety action plans completed in 2017 and 2018, as well as the vulnerable road user safety assessment completed last year as part of the SHSP. The ADSAP is being developed in close coordination with the SHSP under the umbrella of the Safe System approach, which we'll talk about next. The state conjunction with the public outreach, as there's a lot of overlap has been done in conjunction with the SHSP, as there's a lot of overlap in stakeholder and public interest in both plans. Next slide, please. Okay, so we talked about overall traffic fatalities. Unfortunately, pedestrians and bicyclists have fared even worse, with more than double the number of annual fatalities since 2010. You can see here an increase in 110%. Next slide, please. Okay, the draft ADSAP goals have been developed in coordination with the ADSAP Technical Advisory Committee, which consists of representatives from federal, state, tribal, regional, local, and advocacy groups. The draft ADSAP short-term goal, reducing life-altering crashes involving pedestrians and bicyclists on the state highway system by 20% by 2030, aligned with the SASP goal that Daniel just mentioned, with a long-term goal to ultimately eliminate all fatal and serious injuries involving pedestrians and bicyclists on the state highway system. Now I'm going to introduce you to Michael Grandy, our consultant project manager, who will go over the system approach.
Thank you, Elaine. So the safe system approach is a shift in how we think about safety planning that the U.S. Department of Transportation and Federal Highway Administration have adopted as a new guiding approach for addressing roadway safety. Next slide. So this safe system approach, which is illustrated in this graphic on the right, we call it the wheel, the safe system wheel, is guided by 6 principles and 5 elements, with ultimate goal of 0 deaths and serious injuries on the transportation system. It aims to eliminate fatal and serious injuries for all road users by developing a transportation system that looks at all factors affecting safety and help prevent serious crashes from occurring. Also, it limits the chances of death or serious injury in a crash through roadway design, safer vehicles, and other measures. Next slide. So the 6 safe system principles, which are listed here on the left and then shown on the outside of the safe system approach wheel on the right, these acknowledge that humans make mistakes. Our bodies are vulnerable to serious injury when there is a crash, but that through proactive measures, redundancies in the system, we can help prevent serious crashes from occurring. And then shared responsibility for safety, we all play a part in eliminating fatal and serious injuries. Next slide. So the 5 safe system elements, which are listed here on the left, are the wedges of the safe system approach wheel on the right. There's intentional overlap between these 5 elements, which is part of the redundancy mentioned in the principles on the prior slide. So let's talk about each one of these. So safe road users refers to developing strategies that promote safe behaviors by all road users, whether they walk, bike, drive, or ride. Safe vehicles refers to improving vehicle materials, equipment, and technology to promote safety. Safe speeds refers to designating safe speeds on the road based on roadway characteristics, and also includes enforcing individual speeding for the safety of all road users. Safe roads refers to designing, constructing, maintaining, and operating roadway facilities to minimize impacts from crashes. So this could mean roadway design that reduces the chances of drivers running off the road, managing speeds, providing physical separation between directions of travel or between various road users, and making it easier to see traffic control features. Post-crash care refers to emergency response services and actions taken after a crash occurs to get timely and critical medical attention to those involved in the crash to help improve outcomes. Next slide. So talk about the safety focus areas that we've identified. Next slide. So we've analyzed crash data over the last 10 years and identified the top 5 factors or location types that seem to account for the majority of fatalities that have occurred. These safety focus areas are unsafe human behavior, which is related to 74% of fatalities, vulnerable construction users, which means pedestrians, bicyclists, or road construction workers, which is 25% of fatalities. Crashes that occur at intersections, 28% of fatalities. Lane departure situations, which is 50% of fatalities. And then crashes that occur on tribal lands, which is 10% of fatalities. And this sum of percentages exceeds 100% because a crash can pertain to more than one of these focus areas. So these safety focus areas help us prioritize proposed improvements for the most likely to improve road safety and reduce fatal crashes. Next slide. Next step. So where do we go from here? What are our next steps? Next slide. So right now, we're kind of the tail end of collecting a lot of the stakeholder and public feedback on the draft vision and goals and safety concerns and ideas for how to improve safety for all in Arizona. Later this year, we'll develop a draft plan, likely towards the end of this summer, and make that available for public review and comment. Then we'll take all that feedback and finalize the strategic highway safety plan and the active transportation safety action plan in the October timeframe. Next slide. That concludes our presentation. Thank you for your time and attention. For more information, you can go to the project website, which is listed at the bottom here, azdot.gov/safety plan. We're happy to answer any questions people may have on either project this time.
Tom?
Yeah, hey, good afternoon. I'm Tom Beresny, and I represent District 4 down here in Pima County, Advisor District 4 in Pima County. I do have a number of questions. On your slide that talked about the 70% increase in deaths from 2010, State Highway Safety Plan, is this for all roads within Arizona, whether they're ADOT managed or local jurisdiction or unincorporated areas? Is this deaths all over the state or just what ADOT controls?
I can take that one. Yes, it is all over the state, all roads, whether they're locally owned or state-owned roads. Yeah, the Transportation Highway Safety Plan covers all roads, whereas the Active Transportation Safety Action Plan focuses on the state highway. Yeah, good question. Thank you.
Okay, and next question. So on your ATSAP, pedestrian and bicycle, we had an overall increase of 110%. That's just on state-managed roads now, that portion of it, or is that everything also?
That stat was for all roads. Yes.
All roads? Okay.
Although it's fairly consistent on the state roads too, that we're seeing an increase in pedestrian and bicyclist crashes.
Okay, so on your safe system approach, I got two comments, observations. I did not see anything on human behavior on age of a driver. Okay, I live down in the Green Valley area south of Tucson. We have 100 plus HOAs down there, 55 plus age restricted, and I got my Medicare card, so I'm an old guy too. We got a lot of old people that drive down there. Their reaction times are bad. So why isn't the age, whether it's an old guy like me or if it's a teenager, why isn't that one of the things in the human behavior? Because I think it should be. The reaction times for an older person goes down. They don't have the mobility to look, side views, looking for blind spots. And I think that should be an element in there also.
Yes, thank you. And I do believe that it is covered in there. On the slide, we didn't list every possible component that kind of fits under those bigger umbrellas of the focus areas.
Okay.
But I agree with you on the human behavior. There's definitely an age component that can be looked at. And there's also an age component in, vulnerable road users. Older people might walk slower across the street, right? So that's something that needs to be considered for traffic signal timing things. And, at intersections, they may not be able to read signs as far away as someone that's younger might have better eyesight. So definitely age is something that we are looking at. We have been, analyzing some of the different data categories by age to see if there's some trends there that we can pull out. So I appreciate you bringing that up to make sure that we're aware of that.
Okay.
And definitely, if you have any suggestions for ways to help those that are older drivers be safer,
I take it.
we're definitely open.
That
to
might,
ideas for that.
that might take action from Department of Motor Vehicles or the legislature, maybe increase your, how often you have to take a vision test to get your driver's license renewed, whether we want to incorporate a reaction test. I've seen those where you could use a website to judge your reaction time in driving, so I don't know. I don't like being restrictive on stuff like that, but if we're going to make the roads safer, that may be something to take into consideration. And I do have one more observation, Michael. I-19 between Tucson and Nogales, the international border, has been identified as one of the deadliest stretches of the interstate system in the country. Okay? Is anything taken into account in either one of these plans that talk about driving habits of our international visitors, especially coming up from Sonora, on their driving expertise? I don't want to limit anybody, but when I drive from Tucson on I-19 going south, we've got a lot of people that come up here with pickup trucks and trailers picking up used articles to take back to Sonora to sell. And not to make fun of it, it reminds me of watching Jethro Bodine on the Beverly Hillbillies, where the truck is stacked way high with all this stuff, and that's what it looks like. And so that's a safety concern right there in itself. So, you might want to take something like that into consideration also.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Thank
Okay.
you, appreciate that.
Thanks. And I do have one question for the Pima County DOT staff. Catherine?
Yes.
How many elements I'm going to assume that you guys are in on these plans here with ADOT, correct?
Sure.
So-
They coordinate through PAG, and then we
Oh, okay.
participate in that manner.
So in the safety plan that Paul, how many elements last month, what the state is doing, are you looking to, how many elements that in the Pima County doing, are you looking to incorporate, if any, in the Pima County plan?
So we will look at all of those elements, and we'll look at the Pima County specific data to drive the selection of data-driven elements.
Okay.
So we want to look at what the state is doing and make sure that we're consistent with that. But we don't want to limit it to that. We want to see what our safety profile looks like for all roads within Pima County.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Catherine. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, anyone else with questions?
Madam Chair,
Bill?
I've got a question. You've talked about your accident data. Have you looked at the accident data relative to the change in traffic volumes? Pedestrian, bicycle, and change in population. How much of the increase in accidents can be attributed to an increase in volumes?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we have looked at that. For example, population in that same time frame, I think, has gone up 11 or 12%, but it's definitely something else going on just besides population. We did look at vehicle miles traveled as well, and similarly, it has gone up close to a percentage of the population, but that in and of itself is not explaining the big jump in the fatalities and serious injuries that we're seeing. So there's definitely more to the story than just growth.
Okay, thanks.
Are there any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you for a great presentation. We'll move on to Pima County proposed budget overview.
Okay, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Catherine?
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Catherine Skinner, Director of Transportation, here for an overview of our fiscal year 25 budget. So it is in the tentative budget stage, and it's not yet an approved budget. That doesn't happen by the board for about a month, a few weeks, I guess. So I'll wait for Gilbert to get the slides up, and then I'll get started.
Hello, hello. No, there is. While he's looking for that, I'll just share. Our budget's very, very detailed. I didn't even try to go into that level of detail for this presentation. I really wanted to keep it big picture. If you do have specific questions, we're happy to answer those. I might not have those numbers right in front of me. There's so many lines to the budget. But what I wanted to provide was, a basis of the big picture of what this department does, the big kind of pots of money that we play with from the revenue side and then the big expenditure side. And of course, we have down to the detail, we have to budget the electric, we have to budget the sick time, the paid parental leave. Those are all individual items. I don't get into that level here. So if you go to the next slide, Gilbert. This is the big picture. So expense-wise, we really categorize our expenses into three main categories. You're going to have the maintenance expenses, which is about $57.5 million. You're going to have debt service, which is $36.2 million, and you're going to have operations at just shy of $15 million. And so that is fully loaded. The personnel is attributed to those various work areas. Obviously, there's not labor attributed to debt service, but in terms of the cost of running the operation of the department, their maintenance or utilities, labor. You go to the next slide. These are our big picture expenses. Of course, there's the $24.1 million that is for pavement repair and preservation, and next year that memo came out last week, and I know Jason will be sharing some of those details in his presentation. Just in addition to the pavement repair program, we do just maintenance as well, the pothole filling, the sidewalks, bridges, all of these other maintenance components, and that's $25 million of our budget. Operations, the big expenses there are going to be transit. We've budgeted to contribute $7.7 million for transit next fiscal year. That increases generally year to year by an inflationary index. So we were a little less than that this year. Then we budget $1.8 million for all of our traffic reviews, construction oversight, and permit inspection. That's a different kind of permit inspection than the next one, which is related to our DSD work, all of the right-of-way permits, site development, those types of operations is permit inspection and acceptance. So I'm going to move my phone. The county is sending out all of our new permissions for our new ERP, and it's vibrating. I don't know if you could hear that, but I could. And then our next big category is debt service. And you saw, debt service is still a very large component of our budget and spending every year. $9.6 million of that is still tied to our HERF bond program that was passed in 1997. $26.5 million is the certificates of participation, or COPS, related to the pavement repair program. So as you recall, there was $50 million a year advanced 3 years in a row. Well, that was paid for through certificates of participation, and there's debt. So getting a new entire resource planning finance system at the county, and we contribute to part of that expense as well, which is $224,000 for next year. So if you go to the next slide, this is looking at revenues instead. So I didn't provide a chart for this, but our major revenues as a department are $7.8 million, which is that VL fund, which is at 57 for next $8 million, casted, and 800 LT, which is a $20 million for a component of a revenue, which is not permit fees. The other component of a revenue, which is not exactly a revenue, it's transfers within the county, but it would be considered a revenue for transportation, is a $25 million transfer from the general fund for our pavement repair program. So if you recall from the last slide, the debt service is $26.5 million for next year. We get $25 million from general fund to cover that. So there's $1.5 million that's covered by departmental funds for that debt service. And we also have a transfer from the general fund for our graffiti abatement program. So that's right around $120,000. If you looked at this in percentages, and you look at this whole chart of all we get equals about $100 million, 18%. So the HERF makes up 55% of that, and the VLT is 19%. If you took away the transfer in component, so really the revenues that we as a department have some control or influence over, they just come to the transportation department, that HERF makes up 72.5% of our revenues, and the VLT makes up 25%. So there's only about 2% of other miscellaneous revenues that come in. The bulk of our revenues are HERF and VLT, which brings us to the next slide. This is the HERF distribution chart. This is from the ADOT website. You may have heard me refer to it before. This is a helpful way of visualizing how is the Highway User Revenue Fund, where do those revenues come from, and where do they go? So let me see if does this have a laser pointer? It does. So these are all the revenue sources, the different places that the fees are coming from. So you have your regular gas tax, you have use fuel, so these are other types of fuel taxes. You have your, another $243 million there is motor vehicle registration fee revenues. And VLT, this is a motor carrier tax. But what you'll see here is VLT. So we get VLT that goes into the HERF collection, and this amount, $587 million, is greater than the actual gas tax, which is only $530 million. So when we talk about HERF these days, you're actually getting more from VLT than you are from that conventional gas tax. There's also this Smart and Safe Arizona. That's the contribution that we talked about last time from the marijuana tax. So Prop 207 that was passed in November of 2020 that has to do with taxes for the legalization of marijuana for recreational use. That's where that contribution is, just to the big picture overall HERF collection. And then there's some miscellaneous other revenues. But what it does is it flows through, and it's distributed to so many different areas across the state. But if you come down to here, this is the portion that comes to counties. So there's 19%, once you get to this level, that comes to counties. And that is distributed based on a couple factors. So it's looking at the gasoline distribution and diesel consumption by county. And it's also looking at the portion of the population that's in unincorporated areas. That's how they're doing the math of how they divide up this portion between all the counties in Arizona. In terms of unincorporated distributions, population, we have the works in our unincorporated in terms of the distributions because we have the largest unincorporated population here in Pima County. It's bigger than that unincorporated population in Maricopa County. Our roadway network is very similar in terms of roadway miles, so we fare well on that part. But a bigger percentage of the math is based on the gasoline sales, and it's the gasoline sales countywide. So we only sell about 13% of the fuel here in Pima County, and so that's a very small percentage. All in terms, we don't fare necessarily that well overall in terms of how the HERF works. Maricopa County gets upwards, I think about 2.5 times what we get. So a significant difference in terms of what they can deliver as a department. And then there's another portion, if you keep following it down, you're going to get down to this MAG and PAG portion. So there's a portion of HERF that goes to the Pima Association governments for regional transportation planning. And that is programmed at the PAG level through a series of call for projects and negotiations between the various jurisdictions that are members of PAG. In recent years, that funding has all been tied to delivery of the Regional Transportation Authority plan. So then if you go to the next slide, this is the VLT distribution chart. A lot simpler, obviously, not quite as much going on here. But so a big portion of this, as we saw on the other chart, goes to the HERF buckets. So it's collected as VLT, others, it goes over to the side. There is a portion of VLT that is distributed to counties for transportation purposes. So there is a portion that goes to the county general fund, and there's a portion that goes to cities and towns' general funds. Those are not used for transportation purposes specifically. But the portion there that's a small amount that goes to counties is written into state statute how it can be used for transportation purposes only. The way it is distributed is based, again, on the portion of the population in the unincorporated county. So we actually collect more VLT for transportation services, for transportation purposes, than any other county in the state. So we fare well there. If you go to the next slide. So those slides all had to do with our what we call the operating budget, the department's budget. We also have a capital improvement program. So this is where we do our projects. A little hard to see some of these numbers with the shading, but here you can see these are the revenues overall for our entire CIP budget. They total $19 million, just shy of $20 million. But what's interesting, and those that have been working in this industry for a while will see that this is a big change. Impact fees are making up more than half of the revenues that go into our capital program for next year. And the other big portion right here is grants at 38%. So, the 90% of our capital program has nothing to do with regional funds, right? The grants. It has to do with competitive impact funds, which is the it has to do with locally generated impact fees. The RTA portion right here is just 1% of our budget for next year, and we don't have any of that regional HERF going into our budget. So this is a relatively small capital program, but it still is a lot of good projects, and we continue to apply for more grants. We have a lot of programmatic grants that you're not going to see in the capital program, but the SS4A is administered through our operating budget rather than this. So there's a little overlap in some of these things, and then there's others that are totally separate. So with that, I think that was the last slide. If there are any questions.
Madam Chair, I do have a question. You have grant writers on your staff? If so, tell us about that.
Well, the county as an entire entity has a department called Grants Management and Innovation. So they assist with some of the grant identification. But when we find a grant that we think is a good fit for us, we do a lot of the heavy lifting of grant writing in-house. Paul pretty much organizes those grants that we're going to go after, and whatever staff did on pull in, depending what corridor is one of our. John Crow, who has presented on the Valencia corridor, is one of our. He gets also a lot of grant writing. It's not his job; he's a planner, but he gets pulled into a lot of grant writing and just as needed staff, depending on what the grant opportunity is. But no dedicated staff. It's just shared duties with everything else.
Do any departments in the county have dedicated grant writers?
I don't know. I know the health department, which is housed in this building, they have a significant portion of their budget that comes through grants, so I wouldn't be surprised, but I really don't know.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
I do. And thanks, Catherine. Supervisor Christie had asked me to have this put on to the agenda for today, so that's why Catherine's given the briefing that she did. But I do have a couple questions on slide 3. I don't know if you want to go back there or not, Gilbert. The $7.7 million for transit, I'm assuming that's for Suntran, correct?
It's
or
for
Sun Shuttle?
Well, it's a combination. So the transit for the county is managed by the RTA at this point. We pay what is a maintenance of effort agreement, which is this amount of $7.7 million. It covers the rail transit, ADA transit, the portions of the fixed route that Suntran administers, but we don't contract directly to the city and Suntran. It goes from the RTA to Suntran. And then we have some rural neighborhood circulator routes that are covered in that as well.
Okay, so do the cities and towns, Tucson, Oro Valley, Marana, Sahuarita, do they also pay out of their collections into this transit? Or is just
Is it a different,
on the hook?
because they run the system. So yes, they pay heavily into the transit system.
Okay.
Or they Valley manage portion in-house, neighborhood circulator, and so contract with manage that portion in-house, and wouldn't have a contract with RTA to my knowledge. I am not, South Tucson also, they are required by statute to receive a certain portion of RTA revenues per year. And I believe it's through this transit agreement that they make sure that that is spent from RTA on an annual basis. I don't know what the agreement looks like formally, and I believe that Marana does have an MOE as well. I'm not sure about Sarita.
Yeah, I can tell you, Sarita doesn't have any kind of a local transportation mover. Down in the Green Valley area, we do have Sun Shuttle that comes down there and runs a route.
Yes, so that's, this
So I was
transit goes
just-
to Sun Shuttle as
Right.
well.
So I was just wondering where the towns and the city of Tucson fit in, since we're putting in this much for transit, how much are they comparably to really fund, I guess, SunTran?
Yeah, and we,
That's the big elephant in the room, right, for
well,
transit?
yes and no. I mean, Sun Shuttle is not run through SunTran. Sun Shuttle is a managed service through the RTA and administered and contracted to SunTran RTA. So those routes that are not the fixed routes that SunTran runs, those are managed by RTA.
Okay. On the cute slide that you got here from ADOT, the plumbing there, looks like.
The tank chart.
Yeah, the tank chart, is that what it is? You go to that, Gilbert, that's slide 5. The use fuel, does that include aircraft collect tackles, like at Sky Harbor, Tucson
I-
National? Do we
To that.
collect tackles on that?
I don't know the answer to that. Do you know offhand, Paul?
I don't think so, but I'm not certain.
I could find that out for you. I just don't know.
And
Madam Chair, having worked for the FAA for a number of years, the excise tax on gasoline for airplanes goes to the FAA. They have a grant, huge grant program that then sends money back to the airports for capital improvements. There may be a small, small share that goes elsewhere, but not to my knowledge.
okay. And that's it for my comments. Thanks, Catherine. Thank you, Madam
Thank you.
Chair.
Any other questions?
I had a question, Madam Chair. Catherine, do you know offhand how many years of, or just dollar magnitude of 97 bond debt service is left at this point? I would have to imagine it's getting somewhat close to being complete.
It is getting very close. I don't know off the top of my head, but it's 5 or 6 years, I want to say. You know, it used to be when we look at the 10-year, it just kept going all the way through. Now we can see the end in sight. And it was factored in when we came up with this into 10-year program. That's how we can pavement program. Our contribution to the pavement program is because we know there's big kind of drops in that debt service.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions for Director Skinner? Bill?
Madam Chair, Catherine, one quick question. It says city and towns 27.5%, city over 300,000, 3%. Is that an additional 3%?
Correct.
Regarding the VLT, did I understand that a great portion of the VLT goes to general funds for cities?
Oh,
and
yes.
towns? So while, this is as much a statement as a question, so while our gas tax has not gone up to pay for roads, the VLT, which is related to the vehicles, it appears a great portion of that goes to something that has nothing to do with vehicles.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
I printed off, it wasn't on the charts, but just for a point of comparison, so you know, in fiscal year '23, we received $18.9 million of VLT for transportation purposes, and $34.4 million went to the general fund. So about twice as much went to the general fund as for transportation.
Madam Chair, I wanted to thank Director Skinner, for this excellent presentation. I think we learned more about your budget and how the money flows for this and the BLT chart that you had than we ever knew before. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Catherine.
Any other questions? Moving on. Repair update. Thank you, Director Skinner. Moving on to the road repair update.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. We are happy to present this month's update to our pavement preservation and road repair program. So we'll go ahead and start off with going through the stuff for fiscal year 24, this current fiscal year, and then we do have some stuff to share with you about our fiscal 25 program as well. So getting started with fiscal year 24, substantially complete projects. We've added one to the list since the last time we met. That's our Heritage Hills Mill and Pave project, which was substantially completed on the 24th of April. And so that list is, you can tell it's getting more and more cluttered on this slide, so it must mean we're getting really close to the end of the fiscal year. We do have 3 ongoing projects still happening. Our Sarita Mountain Road Mill and Pave project is getting really close to the end of that project. They just have some final items to really clean up work, and then final striping are really the only items that are outstanding on that project. Tanque Verde surface treatment, there's really about 1 more week of work on that project before they get to final striping. They've got all their fog seal work is complete with just a couple areas for overlay work for that surface treatment left to do. And then that job will be moving into the substantially complete column as well. And then that Foothill surface treatment project is really just getting going. So the notice to proceed is today. So this is day 1 of the project. So it still has the whole month of June left to go along. But that once it gets going in earnest, really start moving along quite quickly. And then the other project for the year to talk about is that Arivaca repair project, which has been awarded. We are expecting notice to proceed on this project for next Monday, so it's going to get going here very quickly as well, with the majority of the work being done in June occurring. All the actual paving work will be done in June, occurring, the final striping occurring in early July. So that's the only item that will occur in July to carry over. Otherwise, that project will be moving very quickly as well. And kind of as I hinted at, that's the whole program for 24. So program completion status here in the chart, you can see that complete portion is grown quite substantially. A lot of those in construction dollars will be moving over here very quickly to that complete column, with that last awarded dollar amount moving into the in construction here within the next couple days as well. Update on there, kind of a cursory update on there. Our map is updated. I put it here just to mention that you can, and fiscal of all of our, they're on for map fiscal 24 and fiscal 25. They're on the map currently with the link there below. Something that we talked about last time, and I'll point out again, is that there are 4 colors on this map now. That includes the new status that we've added, which is the complete and under warranty, which gives a little more information on just how that project's still going, because that is technically still part of the project stage. Even though the job's complete, it's still under warranty with the contractor. And that's that purple color that's been added to the map. With that, we'll jump into the fiscal 25 program. So really, getting started off, we just wanted to talk briefly again about the overall program guiding principles. And this is for any given fiscal year. This isn't unique to fiscal 25, but the overall program guiding principles, we do have that functional split, functional class weighting with the 70% maximum dollars going to arterial collectors, which would mean that a minimum in any given fiscal year would be 30% for locals. Additionally, up to 35% of the yearly budget for preventative maintenance, that's your surface treatments, is present. And then these treatments are going to be appropriate for the distresses present on the road as well. See the breakdown of for our PCI categories, and then the overall network goals to have no more than 5% of the network in very poor condition, so that's that under 25 PCI, as well as retaining at least 50% of the network in very good condition. And that's the network goals for any given fiscal year. And we are happy to announce that we are once again meeting those network goals this current fiscal year with 1% in that very poor and 69% in the very good category. So not only are we meeting the network goals, but we're blowing them out of the water currently, and so the goal is to continue with that. Specifically in fiscal 25, here's kind of how the target dollar amounts break down. So as Director Skinner mentioned earlier, we have $24.1 million for the total budget of the preservation and repair program in fiscal 25. And we did choose a 55% allocation to local roads and 45% allocation to arterial collectors. So that kind of offsets, if you remember this current fiscal year, we were at 70-30 guiding arterial collectors. So as discussed when we were going to these guiding principles, we have the ability to adjust any given year based on what we're seeing with the overall network. So we decided to put a little extra of that split to local roads this fiscal year to help with that. How those dollars split out, so that works to $13.255 million for local roads, with 16.5% of those dollars going to surface treatment and 38.5% to the repair. And then the arterial collectors works out to $10.845 million, with that split out 13.5% to surface treatment and 31.5% to repair. So just of note, again, these are target dollar amounts, so the actual dollar amounts could vary slightly based on the road selected and the project cost at the end of the fiscal year. So how does this break down into projects? So here's what we're kind of projecting for this year. We're projecting to have one hard bid paving project, so one of those really big, fairly medium-sized dollar amount projects. 1 to 2 curb ramp projects that are going to be under the job order contract style. 1 to 2 curb ramp and paving projects. So this is a combo curb ramp and paving job. We haven't done one of these in quite a while, so we're really trying that out this year to see how those work. If we're going to get better control from contractors with dollar amount and whatnot on that. 7 to 8 paving jock projects, and then 7 surface treatment projects. Those numbers that are varying are because we are trying out one combo curb ramp and paving job, which we'll talk about here shortly. And then dependent on the success of that job with dollar amount, we may combine a curb ramp job and a paving job into one. So that's why you see that fluctuation in range there. Depending on how the first one goes, we may make a second one out of 2 separate jobs, combining them to one. So that explains that variation there. So I've teased enough. Let's talk about some projects for fiscal 25. The first project to talk about, this is Pima Mine Road and Ocotillo Ranch Road. This is in our package preparation stage. We are getting ready to advertise this job this week. That's the goal. Engineer's estimate is $1.4 to $1.6 million. So this does include Pima Mine Road west of Mission, Ocotillo Ranch, and all the road name changes about 4 or 5 times, but for all intents and purposes, it's the same road, as well as the local road off of Pima Mine, which I believe is Avenida Red Roan. I wrote that down on purpose. So all those roads are in this package. There's 5.56 miles of local road in it. And we are anticipating the expected completion date on it will be the 30th of October. So the second job to talk about, this is the Sonoran Ranch Camino Verde Estates curb ramp job. So this is also in our package prep, getting ready to advertise this week as well. Engineers estimate of 1.2 to 1.4 million on this one as well. With 96 curb ramps on this job, the expected completion date of the end of February of 2025. And of note, obviously, is that the paving job for this will happen after the ramps are done. So this will be one of the traditional ones we've done where we do the ramps first and then a paving project to follow it. An area of the Sonoran Ranch subdivision off of Valencia. Western area of the county, Sonoran Ranch subdivision is off of Valencia and Ajo Highway area. Camino Verde Estates sub off Camino Verde and at the same time in the curb ramp project. So both those divisions will get done at the same time in this curb ramp project. And the last project we just wanted to highlight really quickly, this is also in package prep, getting ready to advertise this week. This is the Riverside Crossing ADA and paving project. This is that combo job that we were talking briefly about. So there's 24 curb ramps on this project and 0.88 miles of local road paving. Engineers' estimate is $550,000 to $750,000, and the completion date on this is expected to be the 20th of December, getting it wrapped up before the holiday season gets going in earnest there. This subdivision is off of River Road between La Choya and La Cañada. With that, I will open to any questions.
Madam Chair. Thanks, Jason. I do have a question on your overall program guiding principles.
Yes.
Okay. In the beginning, when the program was briefed to the Board of Supervisors in November of 2019, percentage of roads to be were good or very good condition. Do we remember, anybody remember what the goal was back then? Was it pretty 100% maybe?
No, it was an average PCI for the network of 80 PCI.
Okay.
So it didn't specify the amount in various condition categories, just if you average the whole thing out, 80.
Okay, so since we changed the goals last year to what we have now, are we tracking the original goals at all? The 80% being good or very good? Are we even looking at that anymore? Because that's what sold the Board of Supervisors. And so we kind of changed the goals, but they were sold on that 80%. So are we even looking at that anymore? What the overall network average is?
Yeah, we do have the ability to track the overall network PCI. That is an item that we have. One of the reasons where we went last year with that was to get the more nuanced approach to it, a more balanced approach. Just having that one PCI goal doesn't necessarily make for a, which you can get to a PCI number various different ways, right? Which is one of the things we've talked about with different PCIs on roadways. And so we found with these network goals, this is more, this gives us more ability to track the entire network of the county in a good way instead of just shooting for one number that you can get to that in various different ways. So I think that was the impetus for this. I don't think that it necessarily strays away from the intent of the program, which was to make sure that our roads are getting caught up with good condition. I don't know if you want to speak more to that, Catherine.
Yeah, I will just add, currently our overall average PCI is 77 for the network. So we're actually on track for an 80 after 10 years. But as Jason was saying, we introduced these various guiding principles so that we were also creating a sustainable network so that we didn't have everything in year 10 needing that pavement preservation treatment and perhaps missing the time frame Very low cost.
Supervisor Christie is interested in that initial goal. And so if we can, like, get an update on that periodically,
Okay.
what that initial goal was, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Jason? Thank you, Jason. Moving
Thank
on
you.
to RTA Next, Director Skinner.
Hello. Again, no slides for this one, so I'll just give you all an update as we do every meeting on what is happening with RTA Next. Trying to remember where we left off because there's been so many meetings on all of these topics of late. Since our last meeting, there was one RTA board meeting. They had a special meeting that was on May 8th, and it was really to get an update of how close are we getting to this RTA Next plan. If you recall their previous meeting, they determined the CAC's kind of work was done developing a plan. Then technical management committee had taken it as far as they could for a plan. And now it really was up to the RTA board to figure out how, if they could assemble a plan that would work for all of the member jurisdictions. And so May 8th was really an update time for that board to meet. At that meeting, they discussed a few things. One item that's interesting to bring up is they did have one speaker at the call to the audience, which was the head of the American Council of Engineering Companies of Arizona, so ACEC. And they spoke to the revenue forecasts that are being used for the program. There's a pessimistic forecast, there's a baseline forecast, there's an many years ago forecast. And the RTA board had determined many years ago to use the pessimistic forecast. That revenue forecast was rerun by Eller. It did increase the amount of revenue they anticipate over the 20-year period, but it is still, they've stayed with the pessimistic forecast. One thing in the evaluation by Eller is they put a percentage of probability for a pessimistic versus a baseline versus an optimistic. And the original forecast had the pessimistic was actually kind of a very likely event, or much more likely. And now in the revised estimate, it's only at about 20% that pessimistic will hit instead of what I believe was a 45 to 50%. So that was one of the arguments for perhaps they should be looking at a baseline. But there were no changes made. That was just called to the audience. But interesting information coming forth from the consulting community in this region. Because RTA Next is a very, very important program to many of us in this industry. The other main item that they discussed at this meeting was a new proposal, because all the jurisdictions, generally the town managers, those that would be on the technical management committee, have been having conversations to see, can we assemble a program that is acceptable to all? I think there's a lot of optimism and desire to have an RTA Next program ready for that public input this summer, but we are getting down to the wire on that. So Pima County has met with, and when I say Pima County, it's the County Administrator Lesher, Deputy County Administrator DeBonis, myself. Paul's been very involved. Rex Supervisor Scott comes in and helps as well to focus in on what are our goals here. And then usually some combination of Jan Lesher, Carmine DeBonis, or myself are reaching out to some of our partner jurisdictions to figure out where can we make small adjustments to the plan that's been presented. At the last RTA board meeting, Carmine DeBonis, as well as Sarita's assistant town manager, Beth Abramowitz, presented a plan that they had assembled that represents a bit of a compromise. And what they're looking for are, the city of Tucson would like a 55% share of an RTA Next program. So how do we get to 55% without making any major changes to other things that have been committed in the program? We're looking at small changes that can be made either in the funding set aside for debt service, funding set aside for contingency or some of the broad programmatic areas such as safety and active transportation. Those are the main areas that we're looking for. Where can there be some tweaks to increase the percent share to the city of Tucson? In the Town of Sahuarita plan that was presented, it's very similar to previous plans we've looked at. No change to the named roadway projects with the plan. But what it did do is there's an allocation for the city of South Tucson, which had been put at $35 million. It reduced it down to $25 million, which is really closer to what statutorily they must get. They also looked at the safety and active transportation portion of the program, and of those funds that haven't already been allocated to specific projects, such as the two Green Valley projects for Pima County and the amount going to South Tucson, 50% of that remaining budget would go to the city of Tucson. They also specifically called out $70 million from transit for the bus rapid transit program, that project that the city would like, which left about $30 million for transit expansion, half of that being dedicated for the city. The Sahuarita plan also is from a $77 million figure at $67 million. It kept contingency at what it was. And now here's the thing that's really necessary, I'll say, to get to the 55%. It's that's being due with the revenues that are collected. We're a program of the amount but thought that we're programmed for. So we're programming to the pessimistic, but there's a lot of thought that we'll collect far more than that. Upwards of $300 million or more in addition to what's being programmed. And so a lot of discussion and negotiation is taking place in terms of what will happen if those revenues come in greater than we think. And right now with the Sahuarita plan and many of the various iterations of plans that we've looked at, they're looking to have the city of Tucson be the initial recipient of those extra funds. They get first right of refusal. And if they were to get the first $360 million of extra revenues, plus all those other changes, it would meet the percentage of the overall program that they're looking to achieve. At the May 8th meeting, there were no votes taken. There was no, endorsement of one plan or another. It's still very much a work in progress. And this Thursday, they will be meeting, and we will find out if there's any action taken at that meeting. So with that, I will take any questions. I fully understand right now it's kind of like explaining a negotiation that you're only in, 10% of the conversations about. So it's a little uncertain where things will land on Thursday.
Madam Chair.
John?
Yeah, so, I've read a lot in the local media and stuff about, the city of Tucson. They're contributing so much of a percentage to the overall RTA revenue through sales tax. Okay, has anybody ever did a study on how much sales tax that the city of Tucson collects that is generated by residents of the other jurisdictions or unincorporated Pima County? Because if I go living where I live down in Sahuarita Green Valley area, if I want to buy a major appliance, I buy it in the city of Tucson. I don't live in the city of Tucson, but the sales tax I pay on that item goes towards the city of Tucson's revenue. So, sometimes I hear what they're saying about people that live in this, residents of the city of Tucson are, they got the big sales tax, but there's a lot of revenue collected in the city of Tucson that is not generated by city of Tucson residents. So has there ever been a study on any of that stuff where, and probably not, you're not tracking somebody's personal data when you make a retail transaction at Lowe's or Home Depot or something, but, that just always, to me, a little
Other comments?
Okay.
And those levels, I think that have definitely come up in conversations at various levels. I think that, you're noticing a point that is, it's hard to do next, as you pointed out, and there hasn't been one done specifically for RTA Next. I know that one side of the conversation will argue if you're coming into the city of Tucson to make that purchase, you're driving on city of Tucson roads, how do we compensate for that use? And then the other side would say, yes, and I'm going to use this somewhere else, and it's revenue that should stay where I am. So, both sides of the argument, but I don't think that it's going to be resolved for RTA Next.
And the city of Tucson is aggressive in their annexation process, so they gain those properties in the city limits that they didn't have before, especially like out in the Vale area. There's a lot of creep out there.
Yeah, there's some active annexations for sure.
All of a sudden, they're in the city of Tucson, but a lot of those people don't feel like they live in the city of Tucson. So I'm just wondering if it has come up in conversation. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Director Skinner.
Thank you.
Moving on to the Pavement Rehabilitation Program, letter to the Board of Supervisors, and I will pass this on to Ed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. All of you actually were here in the last meeting when we approved the letter, which Charlene has signed and has gone to the board as of, I don't know, May 2nd or somewhere thereabouts. And I did comment at that time that it's nice to send a letter. And we've worked hard to get to that point. Over a year, we've worked off and on to figure out what we'd recommend for revenue. The last time we sent a letter and asked for $13.5 million, we got zero. The only real way to get what we're suggesting is go talk to our supervisors. And I suggested that. And after the meeting, John Burnell came to talk to is the route we should. The people we ask to talk to, if you will, our bosses, the people who are appointed us. We are their sounding ear with the public. We are their analyzers. We can help with an independent opinion. In any event, Frank and I have set up a meeting with our supervisor, Chair Alita Grajava, and we're meeting on the 7th. I have developed talking points for that meeting, which I have shared with Frank, and he's provided his comments to me. I've also asked Deputy Director Paul for some additional information on sales tax revenue, which our paper refers to, but we don't really have the information, and I think our supervisors need to know, and that is what your local jurisdictions have used sales tax in the past, and at what rate. Because right now, Maricopa County is the only really entity that's quoted in our paper. That gets a little lonely when you only have one other county. So hopefully there's some others, in which case we'll be referring to that. Also, interestingly, in the paper it says in 2022, 43 jurisdictions passed some form of sales tax dedicated to transportation. These are the sort of things that kind of pop out that I think we need to mention to our supervisors. They're the ones who decide this. They're the ones who decide this. And remember what John Burnell said, hey, maybe this won't go somewhere, but maybe something that would go somewhere is putting a little bit of money out of RTA into roads they've already built over the last 20 years. Whose shoulders does that fall on if we don't have that? The shoulders of the jurisdictions. That means we have more roads to maintain if we don't get that sort of thing. Anyway, those sort of things I think are important to bring to the attention of the supervisors. I'd be happy to report back on that meeting, and I'd be happy to share the talking points with the rest of the committee members. I was talking with Chair Robinson about how do we get to the one supervisor where there are no representatives. And we've kind of talked about maybe 2 or 3 of us going and talking to that supervisor. I truly, truly believe this is the way to make it happen. Having been involved in other nonprofit and other groups in the community, if you go and talk to the council or you go and talk to the board, you get an audience. They will hear you. They will meet with you, and they'll do it timely. So we have to figure out a path forward. My recommendation continues to be, let's go talk to our supervisors. So, Madam Chair, once I get the information from Paul, I'd be happy to send it to you, and you can distribute as you think appropriate. And of course, people can revise these talking points to whatever they think relates to the letter we sent. But my experience has been working with local jurisdictions in the past and currently, you get something, you go ask for it. If we don't go ask for it in person, I'm not sure it's close. But if we do, I think the chances increase. And remember, it's qualified on what happens to RTA. We're not trying to poke the fire with something that's more than the Board of Supervisors can consume. 0.5% sales tax is a lot. Adding another 0.5%, probably too much. So if RTA doesn't make it, and it has a lot of pluses, but if it doesn't make it, we need a backup plan, and this is the backup plan. So with that, Madam Chair, that's what I would report on. Thank you very much for signing the letter and sending it. A lot of hard work on the part of the committee. Thank you all so much for what you've done. Let's just take it another couple of steps and see if we can have a real impact. The department needs this revenue. They need more revenue. We've seen that. There isn't enough for what they're doing.
Does anyone have remarks?
Enough said.
Thank you, Ed. Does Ed just mention any other remarks?
Just looking.
Or anything regarding what?
Very much so. Thanks.
Okay. Next is call to the audience. Is there anything?
We don't have any call to the audience.
Okay, thank you. Future items for discussion?
Madam Chair, this may sound kind of quirky, but when I go on the Department of Transportation's webpage on the Pima County website, there are multiple maps doing multiple things. The one that Jason showed us today is an example of one of them, the road preservation, the overall PCI rating. Can we get kind of like a primer or how to go through the different maps on the transportation's webpage? You know, so we can tell the folks out there had to go find one, you know. This morning, I wanted it and I had to go find it on the other one. So can we get maps do what things? Thanks.
Sounds good. I know it's hard to find things on our webpage sometimes, for sure.
And I will also include a summary for you, Ed, for your meeting with your,
Yeah, I think a follow-up discussion on where
Yes.
we're at with these meetings and what the progress and response has been would be helpful to the committee. Thank you.
yes. Any other ideas, suggestions? Okay, the next meeting is scheduled June 25th, 2024. I think we had talked about possibly taking 1 month off during the summer, and I think we're still looking into what month would be the best month to do that. So, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Have a good rest of your day. See. Thank you.